How did you manage that? Like, what was the biggest lessons during those 10 years from your failures and successes?
Well, I think obviously the number one thing was to find the right people. And I had some real solid performers that worked with me and that were great assets to the business. So they just make the whole experience so much more than if you try to do it with on your own, first of all, but also with people who just don't have the same level of skills.
Welcome to the podcast called Leaders in Technology. In this podcast, we interview exceptional leaders that have proven to add massive value to the organizations they work for throughout their life and their years of experience. And today we have with us a beautiful example. Andrew, brother, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Excellent. Andrew, for the audience, can you tell us what's your full name, where do you live, and what do you do for a living?
So my name is Andrew Draper. I am based in Kelowna, British Columbia in Canada. Been here for about 25 years. I am currently the CEO of a company called Tripleview Technologies. We acquire, grow, and build software companies in the public sector arena. Specifically companies in the United States.
That's fantastic. And I know it has taken a long time for you to get to that level, to that incredible level that you are right now.
Well, it's been a lot of work, lifetime of work, actually.
Beautiful. Andrew, let's go back in time. I love these questions because it really shows the whole story. Your senior year in high school, where were you at and what was in your head?
Oh my. Well, at that time, I actually was planning on being a chiropractor. That was sort of something I had aspired to, mostly because I had some good friends that I grew up with, whose parents were, and I kind of saw that, thought that would be interesting. And so my initial inclinations was to go into medicine. That's sort of where I was at the sort of last year in high school. Really had no technology sort of aspirations at the time. I grew up in the era of the early days of the desktop computer, and the concept of being a nerd in those days was kind of not highly aspired to. Changed a lot though in the years.
Wow. Did you what was your choice for going to college? Did you go to college at all, or what happened after?
I attended did an associate degree in Camosun College in Victoria.
And
I studied business there. Business. Yeah.
So you never went into...
No, I tried. I did about 6 months in a pre-med program, and I thought, I am not going to like this at all. And that just quickly silenced that aspirations very quickly, and so I pivoted around and did a degree there in business, which was my primary sort of interest level at the time. Little things I didn't know about what I enjoyed until I learned later on in my career.
How did you get into technology? Like, what happened after you graduated from university? Did you get a job?
Yeah, so after I finished school, I started working for a nonprofit organization. I was hired on as their operations manager. We had a large facility and programs that they had run, and they had struggles managing systems within the organization. And so I took it upon myself to figure out the answer to questions around how they were handling operational systems within the business, and started exploring options. At this course time, there weren't a lot of computer software solutions that worked on the desktop environment. And so that's where I started tinkering. So I, by my nature, am a tinkerer. And so started playing around with some programming languages and ended up writing an operational system for the business on my own.
Wow.
That we adopted and used.
What language did you use?
That was in DBase 4.
Wow.
Started off in DBase 3, moved to DBase 4. That was kind of the beginnings of it. And that sort of sprung a whole new horizon out for me as to where I would go and what I would do. I was fascinated by what I had worked on, and had good success with doing it, and found myself doing a number of projects kind of on the side to the day job for a number of years, putting together a variety of different custom solutions based on that same platform. And that was the sort of beginnings of my career in the technology space.
It's amazing. We go back way back when, like, I remember my first professional product was a payroll system. And I built it with a friend of mine, fresh out of university, and we used Clipper, which was a compiler for DBase.
Yeah, yeah. There
It was
you go.
like revolutionary because it was PC based, right? No mainframe, right?
Exactly. This was the edge of the next wave, really, of what was coming from the Bill Gates and his desktop or a PC on every desktop.
That's crazy. How long did you last in that non-for-profit?
I was there for about 4 years or so, just doing the math. So about 4 years or so. And then I started getting a little antsy when I realized, there's some things that I really enjoy doing. And so I went from there and started a consulting business. I had another friend who contacted me about a project in the provincial government here in British Columbia. They needed a replacement really quickly to an old VAX system that they had that was used to manage some products for their insurance underwriting. And I got dragged into a project with them to solve a problem really, really quickly. And so we had to flip a system around. And so I ended up writing that application for the provincial government to replace the way they handled underwriting for crop insurance in the province of British Columbia.
That's incredible. So all of a sudden you became a software development consultant from being from business to technology, just like that.
It just seemed to happen overnight, although it was a bit of a drawn out process. But yeah, over time, that's what happened. And that kind of was a platform from which I built. And so I started a consulting firm, and I did that for about 10 years, doing a variety of consulting projects, a lot for the provincial government, and found a niche in finance systems. So we built insurance product solutions initially, as I said, for the provincial government, but then got into it with some private industry and ended up writing software for private insurance companies that provided administrative insurance or services to underwriting for group benefit plans. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of the beginnings of that. And that sort of morphed then into web application development. This was the early days of the ASP Classic Microsoft development platform. And so we started working in that space and built solutions there. And so that lasted.
During those 10 years, like you and I know, like writing custom software projects is risky and very difficult, especially managing scope and making sure the client is happy all the time. How did you manage that? Like, what was the biggest lessons during those 10 years from your failures and successes?
I think obviously the number one thing was to find the right people. If you've got a good team of people, and I had some real solid performers that worked with me and that were great assets to the business. So they just make the whole experience so much more than if you try to do it with on your own, first of all, but also with people who just don't have the same level of skill. So I think that was number one, having a really solid set of skills. And then it's really about learning how to communicate with the customer. That's probably what I learned the most in that experience, was how to talk to a customer, to understand what they're thinking and what they actually want. Because we learned very quickly, of course, customers, they think they know what they want, mm-hmm. and they have a vision of what they want. But when the reality comes down to it, it requires a really talented individual to help tease from them the realities of what they ultimately need and sometimes afford.
Yeah, and especially when you're working with public organizations, it's very, very hard because they tend to have fixed budgets, right? But they want to have it all.
Yeah, they want to have it all, and they want you to write it all out for them, which was particularly irritating because, this is pre sort of the advent of the agile methodology, which came later in the industry and has been a great improvement in the methodology for how we go to market with software. But It was hard. It was hard to get those customers to agree on things. But once you did it, and you could build something, then of course the magic started, and that's when everybody had fun.
That's wonderful. Tell me more about a bit more about Agile. So you were using waterfall before, and what's the difference?
Yeah, we started off in the waterfall space, mostly from the government perspective, because that was required to help them get funding. They need to understand scope and effort. And you know, so later, after I had kind of moved out of the consulting business and started doing some work back in industry with some other friends, I started to learn more about kind of Agile and how it could be applied to solving these kinds of software dilemmas of building something for a customer, or in this case, for product software. As I left consulting, got into product development, specifically with, you know, multiple users, then now you're trying to find a way to roll this software out. And a lot of that learning came from some very painful experiences where software got released into production that were what I would call the big bang software release, where you're releasing a large chunk of code and it didn't go well.
Yeah.
And we had a deployment that went terribly poorly and created all kinds of mayhem for the customers. It was an early day cloud application. And so the problems were multiplied across every customer, and we just had massive performance problems. And that all came from the fact that the code got released in this big bang release, something that, of course, Agile shifts us away from.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've seen a lot of that in my life. I remember we acquired a client in the real estate industry. So they were a software company that did accounting software for realtors across North America, one of the largest software companies in that area. And they hired my firm because they grew an internal development team. And even though they followed Agile, the foundation was so big and they didn't go to market early enough. So that's what happened. Once they were in production and they tried to sunset the old system, they were down to their knees and they were actually going under. Like their company was so going under.
Yeah.
And
the risks are huge.
You know, and the hard part when that happens, I don't know if this ever happened to you, is that, you know, we went in there, we did an architecture review, and we told them, this is going to cost you more to fix it than to build it again. And it's that's
not what they want to hear.
They don't want to hear that. So what we ended up doing is we did a heart bypass surgery. So we took the heart of the software on the side and we created another heart. And that gave us enough time to rebuild the application, and then it became very successful. But this time we delivered to the business in little chunks, right? And I think that's the beauty about Agile, right? Once you have something that you can prove that works and you put it in production, or at least a piece of it, then you can keep adding on that until you have a beautiful flesh, you know, grown product. And by the way, products never end, do they? There's always improvements.
They keep a new life over and over. Yeah, never changes.
You know, one of my first jobs as a software developer was for the Waterloo Board of Education, and I was just a young developer wanting to add value, and so that a couple of schools asked me to build something for them that will save them at least 3-4 hours a day. But we were servicing hundreds of schools. And so I took it upon me to do it on my free time. So I built this application and I released it. And then my boss calls me over and he said, I thought he was going to congratulate me. But then he said, David, did you do this? I'm like, yes, I did. Okay. And then he says, you know that we don't have any budget to support this software? And I told him, but you know, it just took me a couple of months to build it and it runs on itself. And he says, no, now they're going to want changes. And now we're going to have to support it. And now when other schools find out that you made it, they're going to want it. And we don't have any money to do this. And I was so embarrassed, right? I thought I was adding value.
Yes,
so I learned my lesson pretty quickly. So what was the transition between your did you do that transition?
So between the consulting and then sort of back into industry with product. So after about 10 years in the software consulting business, I got approached by someone I had done some consulting for before, looking for someone to run an R&D group within their company. And so that was an interesting opportunity. One of the challenges, of course, with being your own consulting business, as you all know so well, David, is that there's a constant need to reinvent yourself almost daily to keep the business viable. And I found that after 10 years, I was getting kind of exhausted with that. It was this constant need to find that next project, the next one, the next one, the next one. And that was painful. And so that kind of led me to rethink about how I work and how I wanted to advance my career and where I'd want to go. And so that led me to this opportunity to work for a company. And I was there to run their R&D group and help support that business. And that was my first transition now back into product development as opposed to custom software. This was actually building a product, which is, I learned quickly, is a very different paradigm than just building a one-off custom solution for a particular niche use case. This was now something that needed to cross a huge chasm of potential users.
Wow. So what was your biggest challenge doing that transition?
Well, I had to learn how that worked. It was about learning to build relationships with these user groups and recognizing the diversity of their needs and interests and being aware of those. And now you've got a sales team that has input. You've got customer support teams that have input in that arena, and then you've got end users who are, in our case, this was school districts we were doing work for. They've got their input, and the end user is actually a student sitting in the classroom. So, what do they want, and what's their experience like? And so, how do you bring those things together? So that was an interesting shift in thought process about understanding the diversity of the use case across the various different stakeholders and personas within that environment. And that really brought to me that sort of the importance of product management and the need for that and bringing those kinds of expertise into the business. And we didn't get that right, I don't think, out of the gate. It was something that came with an evolution of time, but recognizing that having the right structure of organization around product suddenly became very imperatively important.
And it's interesting because it's completely a different ballgame, right? Like the politics of running a consulting firm with clients is completely different from the politics of being the leader of a product inside an organization where you actually have to service other C-type people. How do you learn that? Like, what was your biggest lesson around how do you get along with the CEO, the CFO, the production manager, if you will?
Yeah, one of the course advantages is when you're in a product company, you are the business. I mean, you build the product that is the business for the company. And so, that gives you an opportunity for voice in the arena of what needs to be done. I think one of the strengths that I bring in my personality to the job is that I work well with people. And so I can work around them and understand, what are they trying to understand, what they're thinking and what are the pain points. I think the biggest learning for me would have been around thinking about it from a revenue business perspective. Historically, I was always just about the technology. What's the spinning of the propeller, so to speak, that I need to implement to make this widget work exceptionally better? Now you're thinking about it from a business perspective. There's revenue that needs to be attached to that. There's the deployment to the customer. There's adoption. So these things that didn't really concern me previously now suddenly came into the realm of this is important, and I had to think about it from the CEO's perspective and from the VP of sales who's got to go out and push this into the customer. What are they thinking and what do they need, and make sure they have all the tools necessary to be successful in that.
That's beautiful. And from the CEO perspective, what do you think CEOs want the most out of their technology leaders?
That's a great question. I think to a large degree, they want transparency. They want to know what you're thinking and for you to be honest with them. Mm-hmm. It's easy for us to promise what we wish we could deliver, but in our heart of hearts, know we can't. Mm-hmm. And so it's easy because you feel the pressure to perform, right? The CEO's on the, thumping the desk, so to speak, saying, we need to get this new module released to the customer. And our inclinations can at times be to overemphasize what we can do and overestimate what we can do. And then that lack of transparency creates downstream problems for everybody, right? You don't release it on time, or it's got bugs in it, which is, worse, mm-hmm. Those kinds of things. So I think being transparent about what the challenges are that you're dealing with and how you're going to get something to market in the timely fashion makes their life better. Although they're going to be disappointed maybe with the answer at the beginning, mm-hmm. They'll be even more disappointed with the fact that you can't deliver as you promised.
You're so right. And I have a great example of that. We acquired a client in Toronto, and it was large company, and they were building video games for children, like ages, 6 to 12 years old. And they hired us to build the next level of the next platform of that video game. I had never wrote a video game in my life before, but we had the discipline, the software skills to hire up and actually do it. And it was a classic example of the technology leader not being honest enough with the CEO. Because they said, I know we can pull this off in 2 years and we need X number of dollars. And by the time we got hired, they had built 10% of the project and the budget was gone. And it was 2.5 years into the project. And it's just unmatched expectations, right? They didn't realize how big this thing was, because the first game that they made was so successful and it was so light that they thought they could replicate it again. But now they wanted 3D imaging and they wanted to have this huge world built, and they just didn't know what they were doing. And they had 100 developers in this project. It was a large project. We got in and I said, listen, number one, you need to implement Agile as soon as possible. Number two, there is a big problem between your technology team and your CEO. You guys are not talking the same language. And quickly we turned it around, and we within a year, we were able to release that product successfully. One more year, and we were able to say what they had. What they had wasn't bad. It was just pure politics and people blocking each other's progress. It was what a humbling lesson for me, because if you really don't talk to the CEO honestly, you could drive the business down.
Yeah, right.
Let alone your career.
Yeah, your career at the same time, because they're out making promises, right, based on your commitments, and they're going to sell it, sometimes oversell it, but they're going to sell it nonetheless to either their stakeholders, whether that's the board of directors or customers, whoever that may be. And if we fail to deliver as an organization, within the team, within the company, as a tech organization and the product team, if we don't deliver, the implications to the business are significant, positive and negative, right? Obviously, if you deliver as you promised and you're predictable in your execution, now the business is thriving because its reputation is well positioned in the market as someone who brings product to the market in the timely fashion, but equally quickly can be tarnished by a cataclysmic failure.
How do you prevent that? Like, based on all your years of experience as a leader, how do you try to have more realistic expectations and better estimations?
I'm a real advocate for process. Frameworks around which we can operate the business, and having the right processes takes a lot of the guessing and the decision making out of the activity of building software. Now, we call it computer science as an industry to refer to the technical, the people that hire in it, but there's a fair bit of art to it. So it's about blending the art. We don't want to take away the creativity nature of this, of the technicians working on your project, the developers and others. But at the same time, you want to put some rigor in the way of processes to keep things in control and check, so that you have visibility downstream about what you can anticipate coming out. And I often use the word predictability. It's sort of the word I love, because it's the ability to predict the outcome as much as possible within the realm of what's reasonable with the inputs that you have. And so being able to have that predictability comes when you've got a series of processes that define how to get from point A to point B. And it varies depending on what you're building and what environment you're building in. But the fundamentals are, hey, we've got a set of processes for this, and we apply this with some rigor to help us ensure that we're able to provide that predictability.
That's beautiful. And I can see how seasoned you are just by that answers. And it's true, right? Like especially we computer scientists, we thrive on processes, but then we tend to forget to that actually the running the discipline requires a process, and the process needs improvement, constant improvement, right?
Yeah, very much so, very much so. And you can't rest thinking that you've got it right today, because things, we'll call it decay over time. Either the circumstances in which you're operating have changed, or the process itself just decays because it doesn't get all the same care and attention it might have when you first launched.
Right. Managing transitions. I know when you work for corporations and you start being successful, you cannot avoid mergers and acquisitions and having different roles played. When was the first time actually that you had to go through a transition like that, where the company you work for is being bought out, and how do you feel about it? How do you overcome that?
So this goes back not too terribly years now, but the company I was working for was acquired by a private equity firm, and I, of course, never having been through that experience before, you don't really know what to expect. But your first reaction is, what does this mean? What's the impact going to be on you personally? Because of course, everything you read in media about companies being acquired, there can be some nasty side effects. And I'd had a little bit of experience with that previously in a different company, and it had worked out really positively. So I came away with this situation feeling pretty good. I thought, okay, let's just ride the wave, see what happens, and be available and be aware of what the opportunities present themselves. And for me, it was fabulous. I got a great opportunity as the company was acquired and they started consolidating. They needed tech leadership across now, not just a single product, but across an array of companies that had been acquired with all of their independent software development teams. And so I was granted a real privilege to come in and now start to be part of bringing together tech teams across a variety of different companies, different countries, different cultures. And it was a real sudden shift in the world in which I had become quite accustomed to this now much more diverse and dispersed environment of people, processes, products, tools, everything that was very foreign to me, but very exciting.
That's fascinating. Andrew, and you mentioned at the beginning of the interview that now you're the CEO of this software company that acquires other software companies. How was that transition? How did you end up being the CEO of a company from being a technical leader? By the way, I believe you're still a tech leader, but now you're acting also as a CEO, right?
Yeah, true. So I actually, the company Tripleview Technologies, I am CEO and co-founder. I have another co-founder partner, Bill Spittle. He and I launched Tripleview about 2 years ago, right in the middle of COVID. Couldn't have picked a worse time, but timing isn't necessarily always our choice. But we kind of went into this with some expectations of what we wanted to do. And so having learned a lot through the M&A world of activities, and being part of this much larger organization that was heavily engaged in an M&A game plan for growing their business, we really identified opportunities in the market, specifically public sector market, where I had become now much more familiar with in building core finance systems within public sector. And as we And I kind of looked across the landscape of the opportunities that I saw out there and thought there was a play for a company to come in that could work at acquiring smaller technology companies within a specific geographical disbursement across the country. And that led to us looking for investors and to come in and support our thesis, and we made our first acquisition last December 2021, and have added a second one since, and plan to add a number of others over the course of the future years. And it's really about bringing these technology companies together with their products and helping them thrive in an environment where they've been successful in the past, but we can add value to them. We invest heavily in their R&D teams, in their support teams, at really ramping their products up and strengthening them in the marketplace, and then identifying new opportunities in new jurisdictions. Many of these companies that we buy are geographically constrained, in some cases just because the owners aren't interested in geographical expansion. We do. We want to grow those businesses and we want to expand those opportunities. So we'll invest at making them able to expand beyond their geographical boundaries. We provide sales and marketing leadership to help them be successful outside of those jurisdictions. And I said, invest a lot in R&D, in how their products need to evolve and be strengthened.
What a beautiful business model. Basically, you're buying out companies for business owners that want to retire, and then you're grabbing what they worked on and expanding it massively with other markets and more expertise and more resources. It's beautiful. Everybody wins.
It's a great opportunity, and it's good for the customers, because many of these customers have been there for decades. Public sector market is such that people don't change their vendors very often, very quickly. And we've got customers that have been around with these companies since the very beginning, and some cases back into the 80s, and they've been a valued customer with them for that entire period of time. And a lot of that's, of course, because of the relationship between the people, but also because you're treating them well from a product perspective, keeping them current on what's emerging in the technical space.
That's wonderful. Do you look for like a very healthy positive EBITDA when you're assessing these companies, or you're looking for lower EBITDA companies that you can grow in?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a variable. It depends on what's on the individual company, but we're definitely only look at companies that are operating profitably.
Right.
The degree of profitability can be variable depending on the nature of the company. So some owners are really not interested in maximizing what they're doing from a revenue and expense perspective. So we will come in and do work in a variety of different ways. But yeah, so they're always profitable. We typically don't buy anything that's not at least turning a profit. The degree of that will vary depending on what we look at, and because we can do some consolidation and amalgamation of services to help strengthen the financial picture, that helps make now this business much more viable in the long term, right? Because before, some of them are struggling, cash strapped, can't really expand, don't have the resources to do it, and we can.
That's beautiful. And what a wonderful example for our listeners, our tech leaders, maybe they're in the middle of their career or at the beginning, that there is so many choices, and the path of life is wonderful, and you have control at the end, right?
Yeah. I think we never know how this is going to play out. I mean, I look back at the course of my career, and you would never have been able to have mapped this trajectory out. It's very much the effect of being available and willing when opportunities present themselves. When I sit down with new employees after we've acquired a company, and the first thing I want them to understand is that this is an opportunity as much as you might perceive it as a threat.
Right.
This is, if you are willing to be open, an opportunity to change the trajectory of your career and the opportunities that your career has for you. That's a difficult perspective to take, because oftentimes there's some damage career damage to people when an acquisition happens. And so it's hard to maintain that open perspective when you see some of that potential pain of other people that might have been laid off as part of that acquisition. So it's hard to do that. But if you can maintain that perspective, the horizons can become very open and very expansive to you that may not have been available before. At least that's been my experience, and I've seen a number of other people for whom their careers have been, leapfrogged as a result of these opportunities, to those that are willing to open their arms and embrace the uncertainty of the moment.
For sure. That's beautiful. Wow. One last question. I want to respect your time. We could speak all afternoon here.
We could. It's fun talking with you.
If you had access to a billboard that was in front of the busiest highway on earth, what would you write in it?
Oh my goodness. I'd have to frame it around life is short. Enjoy the moment. There's too much that, and I speak not because I'm an expert in that particular vein, because I often find myself too wrapped up in the moment, but it is those reflective times when you recognize that life is relatively short in real sense. When you're 20 years old looking at 70 years old, you think that's an infinity away. When you're further down that road, looking back, it doesn't seem that far back, and the forward doesn't look that far forward. So you kind of recognize that, hey, just grab the moment and take advantage of what's happening in front of you and enjoy those privileges that you have, because you don't know how it's going to change, and trust the outcome. Trust that you're going to do the right thing and you're going to make the right choices in the process. You'll make some dumb ones. I did, but in the long term, learning from and be willing to embrace the opportunities has been excellent for me.
Andrew, that was so inspiring. Thank you so much, and it's so
my pleasure.
Andrew, if people like to find out more about your business or they want to get in contact with you, how can they find you?
So you can find me online at tripleview.com. My email address is pretty simple. It's andrew@tripleview.com. And any questions, comments, love to hear from you, especially if you've got a small public sector software company you're looking for a place to divest yourself of. Love to talk to you about that. Something that's keenly interesting to us in this present time.
Fantastic. Andrew, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks.
God bless you, brother, and have a wonderful rest of the week.
Yes, you too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Leaders in Tech podcast. Check in next week to keep learning how to use technology and leadership to change the game. See you next time.